Okay, time for an update. So, this is what we have so far. I got the rear motor all cleaned up and reassembled. So it is good to go. It might need a little more grease in the gearbox, but it feels pretty good. So that's good to go. It's just 2x4s to mock up the frame, and then there are the rails. It's got this piece to connect them. It's got this piece to connect them so I can roll it along the trolley right now, but assemble that. So I got those rails, I got the bearings mounted to the rails, and then got the rails mounted to the plate. They're just tacked on right now, they're not solid, just to see how everything fits. And then I got the rails completed today. I got those welded up. Basically what I had to do to make the rails, we'll do the front probably in a second, but what I had to do to make the rails is I had 3 of these pipes, equal lengths. I forget how long they are. It's 55 or 56 inches total. So I had 3 of these beams here, and then I just cut them in half, so it would give me 6 L beams essentially, and then turn those over, welded. I had another piece of pipe, this one, the front one, and then these 2 right here. This was another square tubing that I cut into 4s, just cut each one of the sides off, and then I'll use those. I use those to space the rails, and then I will use 2 more in the middle, but I'll weld those on once I get the mid frame out here and get this mounted to the mid frame to see where I'll need to put 2x4s for those things to mount to. So that is that's all good. I got the what I tack welded those just to make sure that the spacing was right. Like I tack welded them and then tack welded those ends on, and then put the rails on, and then put the plate on the rails, and then tack welded that, and then did the same for the motor mount carriage. Put the rails on there, and then tack welded that on. I did it at 90 degrees. I used an L bracket, or an L, the magnet, I don't know exactly what they're called for welding, but the 90-degree magnet, to make sure that that was 90 degrees. I believe it is, to the best of my abilities. And then today welded the gaps in the frames. I notched the ends of the tubes so that way I could weld the gap and then grind it flush. And so did that with all of them. And then this last piece here, these first 2 pieces, this one, and this one, they were 2 square tubings. They didn't have anything welded onto them. They just had these holes in them right there, and back there. But the bearings run above it, and so it's not an issue. I didn't have to weld those closed, thankfully. But this last tubing down here had a bunch of stuff connected to it, plates on either side, and a tube coming off the front. It just had a ton of stuff welded to it, so I had to cut all that off. And in cutting that off, I marred the surface of the rail, what became the rail. So I had to weld those marrings in, and then grind them back, so that way it runs smooth, and it feels pretty smooth. I mean, it's still a little lumpy because I did it with a disc grinder by hand, so certainly not perfect, but good enough. I've put a little bit of weight on there, like I sat on that back plate and put my feet on that front plate, or the front trolley, and rolled back and forth on the frame, and it definitely feels pretty smooth. It doesn't feel like it would be too much, but It also has to have the weight of the upper frame plus all the peripherals and everything, plus the rider and the chair and all that, so it's going to be a lot more weight on there. But that will essentially be the next steps we need to do in creating in converting the Ford off over. So for the motor, I've got the GT2 pulley on there. Let's get a little bit of light. There we go. I got the GT2 pulley on there, and then I've got the other GT2 pulley on the potentiometer. These are really small wires, and I need this to wire up to the front, so this rear motor here and the traction loss motor will both sit at the rear of the frame. One will be this way, and then one will be this way. So both of those are going to have to run completely under the chassis to the front where the Arduinos are. So I've got to add a ton more wire to this back motor. And then I'm going to use this coiled where's the end of it? It's got 3-stranded cable in there. 2 of them are isolated and 1 of them's just free, but this is what I use to wire up my potentiometers, and I've got a pretty good length of it, so I'll wire up that last potentiometer like I have with the traction loss one, so that way it can run all the way to the front. And then I've got another Arduino that I'm going to hook the traction loss motor and this motor up to. Currently I just have the traction loss motor on the 3rd channel of the Arduino Uno, and that's not great. It's a much lower not resolution, but it's just lower processing power from what I understand. So I'll have the surge motor and the traction loss motor on their own Arduino on channel 1 and 2, which means all 4 of the motors will be on the first 2 channels of the 2 Unos, which would be essentially best case scenario. But this is where we're at right now. Next step is I need to break down my 3 DOF downstairs and bring each one of the 3 frames outside. The top frame will get mounted onto that plate there, and then I gotta add cross braces because that's not nearly strong enough to handle all that weight sitting on it. It would basically just fold like a taco. So I gotta brace that a ton, and then I gotta figure out the distance between that and that. But I also want to lower the entire 3 DOF. That's why I'm going to rebuild the entire lower frame. It's on vertical 2x4s. I'm going to lay those flat, so that'll reduce a little bit of height. The distance between the lower frame and the mid frame is, I don't know, about 6 inches to 8 inches, 10 inches, something like that. So I want to shrink that down to where it's basically like an inch or 2. And then the distance from the mid frame to the top frame is like 1.5 feet, 2 feet maybe. And that's necessary because when the front frame dips down, if I lower that more, then when the front frame dips down, it'll hit the cases of the 2 front motors, the pitch and roll motors. So what I'm thinking about doing with that is rebuilding the front of the mid frame and cutting it off basically to where these motors will sit in their furthest back position. I'll cut that frame off and just attach 2 pillars out the front of the frame to support the rails, and having those 2 pillars so far inwards means that I can hang those motors down below where that frame is. And if I hang those motors down below, I won't have to cut the connecting rods because I'll hang the motors as low as I cut the U joint on the mid frame. So that way it'll drop the upper frame. And if I drop the motors in tandem with it, then they won't, when it rolls down, it won't actually hit the motor casings anymore. So it's kind of hard to explain. And I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to do it. I need to get all that stuff out here, rebuild the lower frame and the entire traction loss portion of it, put the new casters on, see how much that drops it, see how much this system raises the top frame from there, and then from there I'll determine whether I'm going to drop it anymore. But I think I want to, because I don't like it as high. I want it to sit really low, especially since I have these two rails set up like they are, instead of how Dr. ADHD 1 has his set up to where the rails, the L brackets will go on the sides, and then the casters, those casters will be flipped and they like sit onto the side of the rails, one there and one there, and that'll capture that to make sure it doesn't pop off of the rail at all. So the higher that I have the top frame and the higher I have the rider, the more weight I have from the higher the center of gravity of the rig, essentially. And so when it rolls with that much weight sitting that high, then it'll possibly pull all that weight shifting over here, will pull that off the rail. Especially if you incorporate a heavy roll movement with a traction loss movement all in one, and they all stop at the same time, then the chances of that getting flung off are significantly increased the taller you make the structure. The lower you make the structure, the less you have to worry about that. So since I'm not doing it the way Dr. ADHD is, at least right now, I might switch to that, but currently I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to try and drop the drop the height of the overall sim, so that way I'm not having so much, I'm not raising the center of gravity so much. But that is the latest update. We'll talk to you guys later.